All right, Doom Vivamus Vivamus Epicureans. This is the Marvel Epic Collection Podcast One-Shot Edition. I'm your host, Nick Smith, and I'm joined by...
Stojr from Stojr Shelf. How's it going, Nick?
Doing well, particularly since we're participating in Kurtis Findlay's Epic Marvel Podcast Reading Club, and this one-shot is going to be our brief thoughts on today's issues. Well, maybe not so brief this time. This one, last time was brief. This one, maybe not so much. Anyway, this is issue number 107, where no X-Men has gone before. All right, Dan Green is taking over on Eeks here. We finally pick up where the main story left off as the X-Men arrive on an alien planet where Lilandra has been taken prisoner by her brother. We get a nasty brawl here, learn how Lilandra became connected to Xavier, we learn how Eric the Red found her, and the mad plan of her brother that caused a civil war amongst the Shi'ar. As things were looking bleak, the Starjammers arrive, and they help fight off the Shi'ar Imperial Guard, but they appear too late as the Emperor's Macron Crystal / Armageddon machine activates and momentarily blinks the universe out of existence. Holy heck, that's a lot. Stojr, what are your thoughts?
So, I mean, first of all, after the last issue, the first three pages are like this warm blanket of like, thank God Cochrum's back. I mean, and this is probably why he needed the time. I believe that this is his last issue. I know you're going to talk a little bit about that, but these first three pages, I mean, give him all the time he needs if this is what he's drawing, right? This splash page of all the X-Men on the first page, and then this huge wide shot with I don't know how many characters in here. It feels like you're looking at the Legion of Superheroes in the Marvel Universe. And mainly that's because he did the Legion of Superheroes. And a lot of these designs were things that, he didn't get to or were homages to things that he did get to in that place. You get a lot of great action. Everybody's fighting back and forth. There's, advancement of plot points, as you pointed out in the summary. There's just so much going on in this issue. This issue is packed from a dialogue and exposition perspective. You get, Nightcrawler transporting somebody for the first time and seeing that there's a tax on that. Again, the kryptonite people have, right? There's,
Mm-hmm.
Storm has the claustrophobia. Nightcrawler, he can't just teleport anywhere he wants. He can't bring everybody along. There's a tax that comes along with that. You get the introduction of, I think, Gladiator's first appearance, if I'm not mistaken. Um,
Yeah, you're
maybe,
probably right. Because he's...
yeah.
Go ahead.
Because we haven't seen him yet in the last few issues. I know we got a tease of the Starjammers in a previous issue, but you got he's Mohawk Space Superman, so that's all great. And then some really good teases of what Jean does when she's scanning the people, wondering why this person here is speaking with an accent similar to like Iron Man and uh, what's his name from Guardians of the Galaxy, Star
Star-Lord?
Lord, meeting up in Endgame and
In the
the
MCU
one
stuff?
that yeah, yeah,
Right.
the one before Infinity War, when they met up Infinity War, right? And it's like, well, why is this, why is this guy from Kansas or Missouri sitting here talking to me when I'm on this alien planet and sort of figuring out that they're from Earth? There's a similar thing happening that Gene's realizing. Why does this guy have a speaking English and has a United States accent? Like, what's going on here?
Mm-hmm.
Some really good stuff. You get Wolverine jumping in this alternative costume, that not only looks like one of the Starjammer or one of the Imperial Guard, but also looks like some people from the Legion of Superheroes. So everything about this is great. I said it was going to be brief, but I just needed to sort of wax poetic on this a bit because it's a great issue. You have some more detailed thoughts, though, so let me turn it over to you.
Oh, it's all good. I brought the double page spread that you were talking about up, and you were talking about the costume that Wolverine gets into. And it reminded me. I swear I've seen that costume before, and I think what my mind is thinking is it's like this cross between what Sabretooth will wear and what Mystique would wear. And maybe I haven't seen it before outside of this issue and when Wolverine wears it, or is it that? Is it just Legion of Superheroes?
It could be. I mean, this is the Legion of Superheroes guy, so it's pretty similar. But yeah, I mean, you're right. It is very Sabretooth-esque costume.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, I am a pure Marvel zombie. I do not deny that. My knowledge of DC is very limited. So, okay, cool. So, as for this, yes, gosh, there's so much going on here. I love that we're tying up loose ends. We're connecting those earlier adventures together in this story, even some events from before the book was canceled and now brought back. Claremont's bringing that stuff in, which is great. Having the X-Men in space, I admit, feels a little bit weird, but I also feel like the groundwork for that had been laid with the Sentinel battle in the SHIELD space station in issues 99 and 100. So, given how this series has now developed to be crazy and bombastic, them being in outer space honestly doesn't feel too out of place. And while I have been familiar with the Starjammers before they arrived in this issue, before this read through, when I was reading it this time, I kept feeling like they were giving off vibes of Star Slayer. All right, this book in the 1980s created by Mike Grell. Grell intended to do it for the DC universe. I think it was in the midst of the DC implosion or something like that. Like I said, I don't know much about DC, but he takes it to First Comics and then eventually Pacific Comics. I think something like that. They were smaller publishers back in the 80s. Star Slayer, I must be one of the weirdest people in the world where my first introduction of Mike Grell was Star Slayer because I just happened to have a couple of issues that I delved into and loved when I was a kid. So looking this up, I was like, oh, is there some influence going on here? And well, the Starjammers are first. All right, Cochran comes up with the Starjammers before Star Slayer, so maybe Grell was influenced by Cockrum. All right, I mean, space pirates. It's a great idea. Really fits into the '70s vibe and into the early '80s. So sure, why not? I did a little research on the Starjammers because of those thoughts that I had. And I saw that they were a creation of Cockrum's that he wanted to have their own series at Marvel. But the showpiece comics like Marvel Fanfare, I don't remember if Marvel Fanfare was actually the one that was out at the time, but stuff like that, they didn't have any space for him to have a story in. Like, they were booked for 2 years when he was trying to get to their own separate little book to just try the Starjammers and see if they could get an audience for it. So Dave Cockrum wanted to put the Starjammers in the X-Men so they could get some traction here. Well, apparently, Claremont tried to talk Cockrum out of this. He wanted Dave to have some financial percentage of the Starjammers, right? If he introduced the Starjammers in the X-Men, the way the contracts worked, those are just Marvel characters now. He gets no financial say in them necessarily outside of the work for hire. But if he had his own book with the Starjammers in it, then royalties start kicking in, something like that. But Cockrum was just so eager that he really wanted to put the Starjammers in here so they couldn't be ignored and then hopefully build them into a book from there. But I think there's a great website out there that I don't read it regularly, but it's something like a comic book myths revealed, something like that. And what they had written about is that Claremont, when he was interviewed, said something along the lines of he knew Cockrum was going to be off the book after this issue because Cockrum was struggling to keep up with the deadlines. And because Claremont knew Cochran was going to be off the book, he tried to convince him not to put the Starjammers in here, but Cochran was insistent. He wanted them there, so he ended up there anyway. And so Cochran only got to draw him one time before he got basically booted off the X-Men because he couldn't meet his deadlines. But eventually we get a mini-series with the Starjammers in it, so, he gets to do his book eventually. But, it's kind of this almost sad convergence. We're ending this new era with the artist Cockrum. We get a new artist who is brilliant in his own ways, John Byrne. And that's going to be fun coming in into the next issue. But, it just feels like kind of a sad loss in a way that we're losing Cockrum after this, particularly with the book that is just so bombastic, so big, and just so packed full of stuff.
Yeah, no, I agree. And, I don't know how the things worked out back then. And looking back, I don't know, at the run that Byrne had on this book, it's not like he needed a lot of fill-in artists along the way. And we'll get to those as we kind of continue with this read through. But you almost feel like they could have alternated or, done story arcs or something like that and sort of shared the book, which is a little bit more common nowadays, right? Just a very recent example is like, Amazing Spider-Man right now. JRJR is still on that title, and I think it's a Pepe Larraz, if I'm not mistaken, is doing it, and so they're just alternating storylines and things like that. I think that works versus alternating issues because your styles are too different. But early Byrne and Cochran here are not worlds apart either. So I don't know that you would have noticed it, back then as much if they had kept on. But I think it's unfortunate for him. Do you happen to know like what he went on to after this? Like, did he do a regular book after this?
I don't know for certain. I know that he would continue doing a lot of covers for the X-Men, I believe, and he has a second stint on the X-Men in the 200s, I think. The exact issues I don't know off the top of my head. I just kind of did some cursory research into this, and so yeah, what else he ends up doing, I don't know. I did come upon something that I thought was rather interesting and shocking, but Cockrum appears to be one of the people who was on the outs when Jim Shooter came in. In that butting of heads that happened with Shooter's editor in chief, and Cockrum wrote a resignation letter that was. A little harsh, let's say, and someone decided to print it in a issue of Iron Man. Jarvis decides to retire and he hands in his resignation letter, and that is Cockrum's resignation letter that is supposedly from Jarvis. That's later down the line, right? That's not happening right now. Cockrum's not retiring. I don't think Shooter's in as editor in chief just yet. That's coming later, but just other little things I saw when looking up Cochran. I thought, gosh, that is what a terrible thing to do to a person. But
it was a very interesting time. Like I remember hearing about things or seeing particular comments or writers talking about things in the 90s and 2000s referring back to that era, the Jim Shooter era, and some of the sort of back and forth and turmoil that happened. I'd love to watch a documentary or kind of hear what actually went on during that era, because Shooter just passed away in the last couple of years, and his career,
couple months.
I think we mentioned it once or twice. Like he started when he was like what, 13 or something like that. Like he was writing for some book and they didn't know how old he was. He's just, he was sending his scripts in through the mail, and they didn't realize until he had to come to New York for something. So he's got an interesting career, but that doesn't necessarily absolve him if he did some bad things as an adult and had sort of a toxic workplace with these people. I don't know who's right and who's wrong, but it's definitely from a drama perspective. I'll get my tub of popcorn and sit there and watch.
Yeah, from what I've gathered, the Marvel camp is split on Shooter, right? There are people who loved him because he did a lot for getting artists and writers royalties and stuff, but he also had a personality of it's my way or the highway, and that of course rubbed a lot of people wrong. Not Claremont, Cochran is clearly one of those people, but that's later down the line. We're in the 70s right now. We got a while before we get to the Shooter age.
Mm-hmm.
All right, Stojer, any final thoughts?
So as the end of the Cockrum era, I think really appreciated him as an artist. The foundation that he laid here, the idea of like the Mcron crystal and blinking some things out of existence. This comes up again in the Age of Apocalypse in the 90s, and how that all kicks off at the end of Legion Quest. As well as part of how they resolve the Age of Apocalypse. There's the miniseries of Gambit and the Externals, and they're the Off in Space team of the during the Age of Apocalypse. So it's very interesting to see the origins of a lot of these things that were kind of peppered in to my early readings of the X-Men, and I didn't fully understand. Right?
Mm-hmm.
You don't always know what's new and what's a rehash from many years before. So appreciate all of that stuff. I think it's fitting that Reed Richards is on the last page of this issue because John Byrne's so connected to the Fantastic Four, and I know he'll eventually leave X-Men to go to the Fantastic Four. So it almost feels like a fitting passing of the baton that character's involved here is some way of John taking over, because eventually he's got such a long run on Fantastic Four. I got two of the omnibuses up here on the shelf, probably just off camera. So those are my last thoughts. Looking forward to talking about some of these other issues.
All right. Well, great. Again, guys, if you've enjoyed our thoughts, follow us on YouTube, where we are going to read, rate, and review a full Epic Collection trade paperback every other week. Stojr, where can people also find you on the internet?
Stojr Shelf on TikTok, YouTube, Reddit, places like that, or our channel on YouTube.
All right. So, once again, thank you all. Be sure to catch us again tomorrow, where we will have our thoughts on the next issue, the beginning of the Byrne era. All right. See you then.